So let's get started. Um, as I mentioned, Joey Connect, senior leader with Proteus, been at this hustle for an extreme long period of time. And so look forward to sharing with you some of the things. So I always like to talk about the steaks a little bit and not the ones you eat. Um, and so there's a lot going on in SaaS software. Of course, there's no lack of solutions out there, and the value of onboarding done correctly is extremely important. Sometimes onboarding isn't given the credit it deserves as far as its impact on the organization. I frequently talk to this. If you're a repeat guest, I'm always adamant about justifying and not only just justifying, but also showing the revenue impact of successful onboarding and what that means to organizations, especially um, kind of in mid-size SaaS solutions, mid-price SaaS solutions. Obviously, $5 SaaS solutions onboarding is typically a self-serve process, right? And so, but as you get into the more money, more problems kind of levels, the impact to revenue and the value of the organization is extremely relevant and expensive. And some of this is, and I'll allude to this in later slides, and I always pepper in a couple of what I call pro tips or just through our experiences with clients and tons of clientele is kind of there's art and science to some of this stuff also. So I'll be sharing some more things, but a lot of the times, obviously, these numbers are not new to you. The only one that you might be able to adjust is the value in 30 days. If it's a more complicated product, that might be a little bit elongated to 60, 90, 120. Anything longer than 120, you're starting to get into super trouble. I would call that mostly up to 90. You better have some wins prior to 90 days just to keep momentum. And because I think everybody knows on this call, you not only are doing an onboarding, but you're also changing behavior and you're changing hearts and minds a lot of the time on things. And so you must progress to create that success. And so yeah, so we're going to unpack these things, and sometimes I'll just say some brutal factual statements that are just it's the reality, and you got to figure out a way around it to be more successful. But we'll get into the bottom line numbers. This slide is in every single presentation I've ever done. So call me lazy, but it's just one of the slides. But I always like to talk about the why a lot of the times, and the challenge, and why TTV is tough, time to value. One of the core elements of why it's tough to achieve consistently, and don't be so hard on yourself if every single one isn't a victory, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But it's an extremely dynamic environment. Again, assumption, you're selling B2B, your product is of some material value, not $10 a month, as I mentioned. And so you're really doing an onboarding, or you're a service-based company, or selling some sort of solution hardware that there's a process there and there's value to that. What is going to happen is you have not only 7 to 10 people maybe on your team in silos, 7 to 10 people on the client side in silos, 5 to 10, whatever the number is. Anything more than two on each side, it pretty much starts to get pretty complicated, because you do have silos, you do have communication and collaboration challenges. All these things start to multiply out. If you're doing an enterprise sale or mid to end, I'd say look out. You're going to have 10 to 15 people on each side, and in many cases more. So you have a people problem, not in a negative way. You just have a lot of communication and collaboration and elements that have to happen in order to make this onboarding go successfully. So it just, again, the more money, more problems, kind of biggie smalls. It's just the reality, right? So you need to be prepared for it, especially when setting the expectations related to time to value, right? Because ultimately, what we're looking at here today and discussing here today is just one of many metrics that our clients and partners want to work against, because time to value is so important. We're going to get to that, but it isn't necessarily the only thing you want to be focusing your attention on. I'll share in my My recap on this, uh, we like to measure, 10 to 13 different metrics because they're indicators too of maybe some other symptoms or challenges going on. So I'll include that in this if you want to explore deeper diver into additional metrics. But today we're really ISOing just to TTV. Okay. But but the challenge, of course, with TTV is what's on the screen here. So many people, so many things, and you're taking them on a new journey. So it becomes pretty heavy lift and challenging for both sides. And all of you, I assume, are looking to do this with consistency, obviously scaling it, right? All of these things, all the visibility, the abilities, I always say, you want accessibility, visibility, portability, scalability. You want all the abilities, right? That's why I always joke is like that's what you want, all the abilities. So yeah, so it's not only a challenge, but how do you do this at scale and embrace it at a team level? All right. So if you truly are new to this TTV, yes, the V is larger there in this in the header because it is the most frequently miscategorized element of this. Um, and what I mean by that is it's a critical metric. Yeah, da 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 da. That's not new to you. What's new to you is maybe defining what value is. And especially if we're all just going to be brothers and sisters here, and most of us potentially are SaaS clients, this is frequently misunderstood as being live. All right. And live to me, and what we, when we work with clients, live is irrelevant to me. Something being live is absolutely irrelevant. Does it have to be live to generate value? Yes, that's contingent typically, but that doesn't mean the client is getting value. And so TTV in your workplace or your leadership style cannot be your team saying, guess what, Tiffany and client A and Tiffany, they're live. That is not value. Originally, during your team sales process or your product or service, you were promising customers some sort of ROI. And I can't get into them all because you're all different kinds of companies, right? And selling into different places. But ultimately, you have some sort of value play. You're reducing time on task. You're doing whatever. I mean, it can be anything, right? So you have sold the client some sort of value proposition. And of course, I assume in your onboarding process, this is actively talked about because you want to set the benchmarks right before you roll out, right? Before you deploy your product, you want to know historically for the last 3 months, 6 months, or even a year, what were those key metrics in those areas so that later on you can show the impact and value of your organization. So there is a little bit of, if you aren't doing that, you want to obviously establish that process too. It's just getting the benchmarks in order for your TTV to actually be calculated for the client. And the time to value is obviously something you're calculating for your own internal measurement, but it also reinstates the reason why the customer bought your service. And we'll talk about some other things around if you're getting your TTV correctly and the client is seeing value fast, you're actually going to start cross selling and many other concepts much earlier in the process, generating even more revenue. Um, I'll unpack this more, but just kind of making sure the underpinning of this is that you obviously have a value prop for your product or service. You're establishing some sort of benchmarks with the client prior to your deployment so you can use those benchmarks for your success stories that will be celebrated and used downstream. So that's kind of a corner, not corner, but a foundational piece of that. So now we're going to unpack this even more. But I always joke like time to value. Now, if many of you are from SaaS companies, you might remember a concept that was heavily utilized, ourselves included, because we have many products, not just Engage. We're a successful organization in many verticals and product lines. And we always talked about minimum viable product. Some of you OGs on this call probably remember that. MVPs, right? When you were building MVPs, or your product itself might have started out as an MVP, and everybody forgot the V, what the V stood for, which was minimum value valuable product. It was actually providing value. A lot of people built MPs, minimum products, no value. I hope some of you are chuckling, and hopefully none of you are in that state right now. But that was kind of yeah, reminiscing. But that was always a lot of the problem with the products. Yeah, it was a product, but it didn't provide any damn value, so it's not an MVP. So I digress. Let's carry on. So again, there's something wrong with the V's, right? Time to value. No one likes the value play. Um, so getting into it. So understanding it more, it's obviously your client is seeing a return. They're seeing a value, right? So it's very, very important that that piece you don't lose sight of. And as you're brainstorming with your team, how to create that, that's where you obviously want to be validating. A measurable, obviously for you, it's a measurable metric for success. It also is very important to your client because you can start setting some realistic expectations with them. And I'm going to unpack that a little bit more in some later slides. Um, it helps prioritize the onboarding focus. So you might be like, "What are you talking about, Joe? Here, this doesn't make sense." Well, it actually, unfortunately, for a lot of SaaS companies, this is where they kind of miss a pretty sizable opportunity, because if your product has a pretty varying feature set, right, or multiple modules or anything of that nature, sometimes we have found that clients will ring the bell, and then when they're onboarding the client on a lot of things that maybe aren't going to help generate that time to value the fastest. So it's prioritizing what module, what features, what team members utilizing the product, um, prioritizing the rollout, the onboarding itself to cater towards the feature set and other elements of your product that can get the client to a very high or immediate return on investment slash time to value on your end. So you might onboard for an extended period of time, but you might be able to launch in a really condensed time period to provide value right away if the client has a specific bleeding point or obviously area of opportunity of that. Hope that makes sense. We like to identify that through the mutual plan process with the clients via our tool, and also breaking the onboarding into different phases if needed, because that can help you unlock a lot of success very, very early. Hope that resonates. You can comment below if you have any questions around that. But we definitely try to help our clients kind of identify those success points that can happen faster and drive towards getting that piece fully deployed, or at least partially deployed, so that you're validating your value. Does that make sense? You're validating your metrics. You're not going to get them the whole ROI in the span of 2 months or 3 months, right? But the incremental metrics should start showing progress towards those overall success goals. That's a very big positive thing, not only for your team for next step potentials, but obviously the client is empowered to believe, hey, this is pretty awesome. There's going to be some big wins here for us once we fully roll this out. So an example, like in our company, if we go into a company that has 7 different products that they're trying to sell, we're going to ISO that to one vertical, medical or finance, one product, so we can take the entire complexity of our rollout of our platform and immediately get quick wins for a client, like instantaneously, right? So just sharing like real world, think about it, because you can slice not only your product, you can slice obviously the downstream, the industry, client type, modules, etc. So lots of different options there to do that. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Help prioritize so you can get quick wins. Aligning the product, all these other ones. Obviously, it's very big on impact and retention and referrals. Um, and I've done many presentations about how great onboarding is a lead gen solution. You might be like, why are you saying that, Joe? We're not salespeople. Oh, no, you're not. What you are relationship people. And you're helping the client unpack all of their problems and they're transparent with you, which, if you can get them a quick win, they enhance their trust with you. And then you're off to the races. It's an amazing um, element for cross-selling, upselling, and growing revenue is doing great onboarding. Send that to your CRO and vice president because it's the truth. Like literally, it's the truth. Um, and that's what that last button is. So why does this matter? So obviously, I think all of you are in the business of keeping customers. You want to. So you understand we're beating this to death, but obviously getting customers their value quicker. It's huge for adoption. Obviously, the numbers don't lie. You're probably looking at your own numbers. You know right away if you have a healthy onboarding, there that client's probably going to stay with you for your LTV, lifetime value of the customer. For many of you, that's probably 3.5 to 5.5 years. Somewhere in that range is what you're hoping. Larger product over 500,000 to net million, you're hoping for a 5 to 8 year hold. So it's very, very important to LTV, also cross-selling and adoption, right? So depending on your product type, that's going to be your upsells, your renewals, etc. The other threat to your organization is the business model is changing. A lot of clients want to do tire kicking. So you might have a product where the client is like, the proverbial, we want to date before we get married, right? Or you guys all know what I'm saying. We want to kick the tires or tire kicking. Probably tire kicking isn't probably right. It's kicking the tire, right? Yeah. No. Um, because you also have CAC pressure, customer acquisition cost pressure, right? So you're wanting to get the clients in because your sell process is very expensive. And so you're wanting to get the client, and the client then has to see immediate success. So in essence, it's a dating game out there, right? A lot of clients want to just date a little bit. So you have an enormous amount of pressure at that point in time because the contract value that they sign for is probably way lower than your customer acquisition costs. So you can see how that actually then ties into time to value because now they're testing you. You're going to be tested. You better deliver some value quick so that that original contract can explode out into the full value set. Okay, making sense. Again, all of these concepts and topics, please reuse in your internal meetings. And this message will be sent out because it's a very important piece when you're looking at your growth strategy, your GTM, your go-to-market strategy for the product, how critical this onboarding piece is to that because these are all the factors that come into it. It's just not onboarding. It's the customer's expectations, their experience, timing, value, how it directly relates to um, revenue. And we see a lot of onboarding being moved. Sometimes it's in client success if they have a CS team. We see a lot of times it's now underneath the vice president of sales or CROs if you're a larger organization, because they're starting to recognize the true impact of it's a critical piece of the overall numbers bottom line. So the cost, as if I knew what was next. So there's a huge cost, obviously, of not achieving this. So I'm going to share with you here. I'll let you obviously digest some of the other things on the screen, but I'm going to share another pro tip. So this pro tip, honestly, is it derived from our own experiences over the years, and then as we talk to more and more customers, this has really helped them. So what I mean by readiness score is the client even ready to be onboarded? And some of you might be chuckling. If you're publicly traded, there's obviously going to be some pretty downward pressure for your quarterly numbers, but still, this is a very important piece to think about because so the customer has been sold, right? And they're going to onboarding now, right? Air quotes around that, right? But when they go to onboarding, that doesn't mean the client is really ready to be onboarded. Um, and some of you, I think, are probably smiling, smirking, frowning right now at me. But I think you know where I'm going here. So for many of our clients, uh, when there's a kickoff meeting, they'll call it kickoff meeting. A lot of the times Well, there's a couple of things that are going on in kickoff meetings. Kickoff meetings for a lot of our clients is still a sales meeting almost because the client now just realizes they've committed to you and they still have a crap ton of questions. But my point on this is going through with the client, especially if you're a highly technical or a lot of data or just you're complex or something, is a pre-checklist with them or a pre-onboarding readiness score is what we do. And it gets the client thinking, wow, I didn't know we had to do all of this, whether it's a lot or a little, it doesn't matter. What you're wanting to do is quantify, can they actually get this information to you in the time period if you're setting the expectation? Let's just role play here, a 90-day onboarding. Well, we need all this data basically by the 20th day of onboarding. Are they even ready to get onboarding kicked off? Or is it better to reschedule, not negatively reschedule, just move the initial kickoff meeting to this date so that all of your processes operate successfully. This dramatically changes your cost and bottom line of onboarding that client and the success of the client, the appetite of the client. They're much happier because they're not in an awkward state with you and delayed. And then ultimately, those onboardings always would go way over your desired time to value. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to share that as a way to get out of using your TTV. Um, but it's a risk management play. If this happens one out of every 30, you might have to classify that a little bit differently, but then underlying, maybe find the root cause why. Maybe it's the vertical. I'm just saying, let's say it's all your banking clients that you're deploying into seem to have the same problem because they're just not equipped to best handle your onboarding. You can make changes to your onboarding process or change the expectations of the TTV. So if we're selling into banks of this size with 500 million in assets under management, their onboarding process is always going to be 75 days or 110 days just because we know these expectations are different. It's not bad. It's just getting smarter about your onboarding process by client type, other variables to that. Does that make sense? We typically also like to look at 30, 60, and 90-day cycles. I'll unpack that more here. But the readiness score is a tool in your back pocket, basically to get your team embracing more and more of this time to value. Because if you don't, you're going to start to get the excuse wagon. Oh, they're different. Oh, they're different. Oh, they're different. We don't appreciate that. Like you can say that, but like you can't have everybody being different because then that's not business. Like it just isn't. Like those are excuses. Own it and figure out a resolution strategy. That's a tool and a tip on how to get that kind of shenanigan talk out of your org. Okay, next. I mean, I'm not being mean, but I think you guys all know what I'm saying. Like we're all adults. Like let's figure out the problem, figure out the symptom, the why, and let's attack it and let's be smarter about that. So defining and measuring it, and we're going to get into more accountability here, right? So it's mapping the customer journey. I think you can see how these all interplay. Typically, we always try to look at it. You have a client, you have three verticals you're selling into, right? Or you have five products. You guys know your business is better than me. I'm just giving you the concept. Of course, this is that how you map all that. What does that customer onboarding journey look like by the industry, by the type, by the size, any other kind of metrics or not metrics, sorry. Um, uh, uh, I'm having a but you know what I'm talking about. Basically, archetypes. Ooh, long week. Archetypes of your customer types, right? And or what products they're onboarding with you too, right? So you got to map all that out, obviously, and have your milestones obviously clearly in play. But I like to also encourage the different delivery milestones, and that's kind of a waterfall kind of effect. If you're able to measure right now how many of your clients launch in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, that's going to start to give you some intel. Obviously, as you start to try to build a meaningful TTV, you cannot start the meeting with, hey, I think we want all of our clients launched in 45 days. Good luck with that. Yeah, it's not going to work. And so thoughtfully figuring out how you get to a meaningful TTV number by client type and by product requires you to start to measure some of these things initially, and then you'll start to roll that into an actual formal strategy. Makes sense, team? I think it does. There's simple little things to do that can add a lot of value, and most importantly, you're going to get team buy-in. And I'm not saying like you got to get your team to believe in it, but they do obviously. But you also can't be throwing out some rando numbers like that never works. And that's why you got to break it down by product type, typically in vertical. Start with that 30, 60, 90, then start to layer in obviously the verticals and other things, right? So ultimately, it's about beginning to diagnose your onboarding process by client type. And then some of this again comes back to prioritizing what features you might want to push out, obviously sooner rather than later, because it might be faster. Obviously, all the things I was mentioning earlier. Hopefully that resonates. Obviously, all this other stuff is just kind of boilerplate, meaning they're they just basically build upon the strategy. Obviously, if you have friction points, solving those, if things are taking longer. So if you have the onboarding, which of course everybody does, I hope. If you don't, think about this, is having your kind of internal milestones. And then if there's big deltas there, unpack that, figure out the problem, fix it, and then push that out to the team and scale accordingly, right? So it's a continuous learning. You can't just set the goal and hit it. Like I'm very adamant about that. TTV is a living thing. It's living because your product's living, your team is living, the clients are alive, I hope, right? And so it's a mutual relationship between you and your client. And so all this dynamicness has to be kind of piped into a framework, and that's what I'm sharing with you. Okay. And everything is from there on out, not emotional. You're guiding based on numbers and facts, which also helps with everything else you want to do, lead your team and other things. All right. So common reasons why this all goes to hell in a handbasket. Um, Lack of clear onboarding goals. It starts with kind of, you can't really have TTV without the V. So what are the goals of the client? Why did they buy our service? And how are we measuring success? Obviously, that is, what does value look like? If you learn one thing, and I don't mean that mean, but like just honestly, like if you learn one thing today, it's just make sure when you're onboarding somebody, there are valuable goals that they want to achieve, and make sure that's documented. Benchmark the past. Hopefully they can share with you. Many of this should have been done during the sales process for the historical information, showing the value to the customer. But sometimes we have found that's not the case. If your org has it, great. That's part of your handoff process from sales to you, which we power a ton of handoff processes also to capture this kind of information. Because it obviously can all be leveraged for insights and reporting, but ultimately make sure that you have clear metrics and a roadmap of how we can demonstrate value to this. Because if you're onboarding, you might not be, some onboarding is done by the same CS people. If you're not, this then obviously you getting the right stuff up then translates to your CS or account team pretty seamlessly to keep it going, right? Slow implementation process. This obviously kills. I talked about doing man, I tell you, needed another cup of coffee here today, team. I got a 3-year-old, and he switched to big bed time, so he's on like he's got his own. This is how I am. Like he's got like a big bed now, like a big boy bed, twin, like a twin bed, and we have like a burglar every night with him because like he gets up in the middle of the night as if he's robbing the house, and then we gotta, it's a whole, if you have kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm a little off on my sleep schedule there. But ultimately I digress. Back to the point here. So another pro tip we like to do a lot is not only prioritizing, like we said, which elements to put out. We like to do pre-mortems, and you might not be familiar with pre-mortems. I'll include this intel in it, but I don't like postmortems because that means crap happened. I like pre-mortems, finding the problem before it happens. So slow implementation process. We talked about kind of the scoring earlier, right? Readiness score. This also is another really fine tool to leverage, which is we coach people. It's public information. Again, Life is about execution, not the secrets. So a pre-mortem is you can. I'm telling you what a pre-mortem is. You got to just do it, and then you'll get the benefits of it, right? So the pre-mortem, when executed in onboarding and worked into a mutual plan, like we deliver all the time, is basically talking with the client. And if their readiness score is good, yes, they have all kind of the boots and stuff. Then it's like, why are we going to fail? So why are we not going to hit the 62-day TTV? And it's brainstorming with your team and the client's team together. Full transparency, none of this peekaboo magic. Full transparency, own it. And it's hilarious what comes out of these meetings because somebody then ironically figures out that Tiffany's going to Hawaii for 2 weeks and she's mission critical to getting this thing. No one knew it because you got to have a plan. You got to openly talk about, oh crap, like Tiffany's doing this and training. Whoa, we can't do training because next week is Thanksgiving, and no one really thought that through, right? Like all of a sudden, you start finding a whole shenanigansville of things that were going to blow your crap up, and now you can effectively plan for that, right, and drive that forward. So that's what a pre-mortem is. I'll share the information on it, but 3 to 6 critical questions that we share help you unlock literally 100 hours of onboarding mishaps, like literally. Like, and it's not like people are trying to kibosh the project or create problems. It's just life, right? Like things are going on. We have a conference that week, whatever, like just all sorts of things. So I'd I put that in here as a pro tip. It's another resource I'll share out. But these are all the common reasons why crap goes sideways. Ineffective communication. Of course, everybody knows that. That's why, yeah. I'm not selling Engage, but that's what Engage does. Brings everybody together. One size fits all approach clearly never works, as we talked about. I always joke. So many. We have a lot of clients in finance and banking, and within banking, there's banks and credit unions, and you never want to get those confused because if you call a bank a credit union or a credit union a bank, they're going to get pretty widely upset with you. And so there's just all these industry related specific things, which again, no one size fit all is ever going to get you your metrics and the results that you desire. And then obviously lack of customer engagement, that the underlying root of that typically in onboarding, and we've done a ton of presentation on that, is we look at everything in onboarding as mutual. It's a two-party dance, right? Like it's two groups working together. So it has to be mutual. It has to be cohesive, has to be clear and transparent communication and collaboration because there is expectation management, but you also want to help them look like rock stars, right? You want them to win because your team then wins, right? So it has to be very transparent. Again, pre-mortem concept in that, readiness concept on that, mutual plan concept in that, a collaborative environment to do that. You can foster those kinds of trust, that kind of trust and relationship. So I think that was the presentation I did a few weeks ago. So if you want to look at that, please, resources on the website. They're all the transcripts are there. You can process a whole 40-minute thing I do in 10 minutes, 5 minutes. More of them. Obviously they relate back. You deployed, you did something, but that really wasn't their problem. And your problem that they're really having, you're solving in phase 2 or something like that. Some of you are probably smiling. Technical hurdles with poor integrations. This is where I we have tons of healthcare clients and people selling into healthcare and using our tool, like healthcare onboarding. Like if you don't get your integrations correct the first time around, you're out. Like you're done. They won't even entertain you for anything else. Like, and that's in a lot of verticals too. So that's a big risk to this. Clearly, internal handoff process. Talked about that earlier. I call that GIGO, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. If your handoff process is crap, a lot of these things won't work as well for you. So you have to make sure you're getting why they bias, what ROI, what their benchmarks are, how are we going to provide value to them? Because these things will be leveraged by you at the handoff into the discovery to really tee you guys up for success, right? Makes sense. Everybody's getting it. And no improvement if the last one, to me, it's again, it's the pro tip of the waterfall, kind of looking at the type of customer, what product they're using, 30, 60, 90, 120. You can add whatever amount of time that makes sense for your business there. But that's the framework to be able to identify what I would call red dot items on your process. Red dot items are things that require your attention or at least pique your attention. They can be yellow, and then they go back to green as you start to find, challenges within your ecosystem. So it's a living ecosystem. This is not a one-time thing because people are always like, our TTV, it's never right. Well, it's probably the inputs to your TTV are not correct. And there's other ways to address that problem. I hope that makes sense. You got to look at it from different purviews. Long story short, equip people for success. I always try to keep these to about 35 minutes. I'm about 4 over. So obviously we do a ton of this. We're very successful, tons of efficiency, but I'm going to get to the last slide here. So as usual with these presentations, you can tell our style. We're heavy on the education. Of course, we deliver all this in our company, but I try to provide these as ways that you can take this information and drive something with it. So a couple of things, if you have any immediate questions, put it in the chat or the comment. I'll get back to you. Two, you'll get a recap of this video, the deck, two of the resources that I mentioned in this, premortem and readiness, and other stuff that I think would be of value of this. And then if you want to, I always make myself available for a leadership kind of call with anybody. I'm not going to demo you. I'm going to ask you what your problems are and see if we can brainstorm some ideas and solutions because I know many of you are probably in unique ecosystems or environments. Um, and yeah, that's it. I appreciate it. Joey Connect, leader with Engage. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your treasure. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.